question.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Bienvenidos a esta edición de Encuentros del Futuro. No hace falta pensar en una próxima generación. Es nuestra generación la que está ya comenzando a vivir los efectos del cambio climático. Inundaciones, sequías, es lo que están provocando los gases de efecto invernadero que tenemos el desafío de terminar. Bueno, de eso es lo que vamos a hablar, porque nuestra generación está comenzando a sufrir los cambios, pero también es la última generación que puede frenar estos cambios. Por eso, la invitación es a escuchar, a tomar conciencia y también a actuar. Y nuestra conversación de hoy va a estar dirigida específicamente a abordar los desafíos en materia de matriz energética, cuál es la energía que está moviendo al mundo y cuál es la que necesitamos que nos mueva, y también cuáles son los desafíos en términos de tener el agua que necesitamos. Por eso vamos a hablar con dos grandes expertos que han venido a esta octava edición de Congreso Futuro, que los voy a presentar y les voy a dar las gracias también por estar junto a nosotros. Comienzo con la profesora Mónica Araya. Ella es costarricense, doctora en gestión ambiental de la Universidad de Yale. Es experta en energías limpias, cofundadora de la organización Costa Rica Limpia. Su trabajo está centrado en la participación de los ciudadanos y también de los consumidores en el cambio hacia una sociedad, como les decía, cero emisiones. Y junto a ella está el profesor Upman Lal, doctor en Ingeniería Civil de la Universidad de Texas, director del Centro de Agua de Columbia. Se ha dedicado a desarrollar soluciones a los problemas asociados a la falta de recursos hídricos, desde la grave escasez que se espera ocurra en un tercio del mundo, hasta la relación entre los sistemas mundiales de agua, cambio climático y energía. Thank you for being with us. Welcome. If there was a decision that our generation could take in order to improve the life of the next generation, what that decision could be?
I think that is an easy one. The generation that we have today that I see, they're already doing that, many of them. And the thing that I'm talking about is that so many of them are taking on social entrepreneurial causes. And as part of those social entrepreneurial causes, they are going to communities that are underserved, which governments do not reach, and they are enabling solutions for these people in terms of education, in terms of water and energy. And what I see at Columbia University is 20 years ago, the typical graduating young person wanted to go to become rich on Wall Street. In the last 10 years, they still want to become rich, but they're doing this as social entrepreneurship, and they're very, very passionate about going and doing these things. So I don't think I have anything to tell this generation, because they're already doing the right thing.
We're taking conscious. And you, Monica?
I am very excited by the things I see already happening, because for the first time, people like me who are interested in technology that will allow us not to use oil for transportation are observing all these breakthroughs that are allowing us to bring these technologies to consumers. And what I see is a combination of drivers. One, of course, is climate change, because we know it's happening and we know that it's pretty serious. But also there is this renaissance of people who are rethinking the city, and that means building better lives, very daily lives, and that means people who want to interact with the city with a bicycle, or even not owning a car, but those who want to own a car. Now we have choices for them, and of course there is the agenda around public spaces and transportation, public buses that are electric. And even 5 years ago, I never imagined that a city like Chile would have 100 buses, electric buses, or that I would be in Costa Rica driving without using a single drop of oil, because the technology is getting cheaper. So it's actually a time where we see a lot of problems, and we should take them very seriously, but we should not allow those problems to paralyze us, because we also know that it depends on us how much transformation we want to see in our countries.
But in Costa Rica, you have been very successful. What is the main reason for that success in order to change the energy that moves.
So to
the
some
country.
extent,
Yeah.
yes. Well, Costa Rica to some extent. I mean, we still have problems, but to some extent, in terms of energy, we are already living in the future. So I come from the future, in the sense that I know what it's like to live my daily life with energy that is renewable. 99% of the electricity in my country is renewable. It's 100% renewable, 300 days a year. That is because we started investing in renewables in the 40s, and it's mostly hydro, but it's 75 hydro with wind and geothermal, because we have a lot of volcanoes. And increasingly, as we heard from our professor from Colombia, these entrepreneurs are also in love with technology, solar technology. So when it comes to electricity, we have done the job. When it comes to petroleum, that is a new frontier, and Costa Rica is asking exactly that question. If we have 100% renewable electricity that we produce, why would you continue using oil for transportation when electricity can do the job? So that is the question we are asking now. So for us, renewable energy, when it comes to electricity, is somehow solved. But this new question is at the frontier of the global debate, which is, how do we want to interact with fossil fuels? And in the case of Costa Rica, being so small, being unimportant, the question is, can we become a lab? Can we become a lab for the world to observe how you become a fossil-free country? And that is the one question that
It's a
exactly brought me
political
to Chile.
decision. Yes,
Yes.
it's a political decision.
It is, but also it's a consumer's decision, is a decision by, yes, politicians, but also companies that are trying to figure out how to be prosperous in this new century, because somehow, even in the private sector, you start getting the question of how do we win in this new economy that is more digital, more decentralized, that is supposed to be decarbonized. And at the end of the day, I think much of the question that will make us go faster or slower is what to do with the jobs transition. Because as we saw in France, if you don't manage the transition, you will have people in the streets complaining that they don't feel included in the new economy. So this is one question that our president is asking: how do we have a just transition so that we don't hurt the people who are already in trouble?
Professor Lal, when I see water resources, I get afraid. Because when I see cities like Cape Town, how many countries could be left in the same situation?
So I am actually super optimistic, not pessimistic, both on water and energy. And the reason for that is the pace so it's useful to look at what happened with renewable energy, because I think there is a paradigm there that's worth understanding. In 1995, the best estimates for the year 2020 were that maybe we will be able to bring down the cost of solar electricity and wind to 20 cents per kilowatt hour to 25 cents per kilowatt hour. That was the projection. In 2015, we were not very far from those numbers. Okay? Today, we are at 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour to 5 cents per kilowatt hour, compared with fossil fuels, which are, depending on where you are and what access you have, are between 5 and 12 cents a kilowatt hour. So the question that I have in my mind is not whether on the energy side there will be a rapid deployment of the newer technologies, but the people who have invested in the fossil fuels, what will their life be? Financial life will be in the future, because they are looking at a lot of stranded assets. So that's going to disappear. And now coming to water, I think similar things will happen. First, to be very clear, the Cape Town story is a climate story, but not a climate change story. The estimates that many people put out that this was a once in a 10,000 year drought are actually not justified. This is more like a once in a 50-year drought, and this is a failure of how these people manage their resources and who they gave water to relative to the amount of storage they actually had. So that problem, I think, is going to be a big problem around the world because we will see big droughts, whether or not there is climate change. We have seen those in the past, and we will see them again. The question is whether the people who manage these systems, and there are many good people managing systems, but overall, I would say water management is laissez-faire. These people they're maintaining things rather than being innovative there. In the same way that the renewable energy transition took place, I visualize that we will have a rapid development over the next 15 to 20 years of water treatment technologies that are very local and are suitable for continuously reusing water to a high degree and are actually substantially lower in cost, just like what happened with renewable energy compared to what we do today. So on the urban side, which is where many people think about water, this is easily solved, and it may follow a similar trajectory. The difference is that in the energy community, they were planned thinking about what should be the future energy platform. In the water community, which is much more fractured, this kind of thinking is not there. So that's a big challenge. The bigger user of water is agriculture. And here, again, what I feel is that as people start becoming more conscious, and we have seen that in the last 5 years, about the sustainability aspects of agriculture, the water issue with agriculture is going to be the most prominent sustainability issue, both in terms of the quantity used and in the use of chemicals and pesticides that pollute the water. This is a harder issue. This does scare me more, but I think particularly, so it's an interesting thing on society rather than on water. Coming from India, what I can tell you is that, yes, there were a few people who did yoga when I was growing up, but it was not something that was practiced very much. Yoga really took off in the West, all over, and now has been reintroduced as a very fashionable thing to do in India. So why I say this is that I think there will be, just in the same way, the movement for ecology and health and sustainability is now pervasive. The number of people who are aware of these issues is all over the world. So what I expect is that as Costa Rica and other places start showing the way in terms of a energy transition or a water transition, this together with the social entrepreneurship will really, really take off. And everybody will want to do it. There's movements for urban agriculture, which many people like. I really do not see that except as a niche play. But the large-scale agriculture, I think, will change dramatically. The range of productivity in agriculture that we have today, for example, for rice or wheat, just to take a simple common crop, is production of 1 ton per hectare, which is beginning of 20th century. We still have that in many parts of the world, to the high end, which is 10 to 12 tons per hectare. So that's an order of magnitude. And yes, it's been induced by using pesticides and using a lot of chemicals, but we are also seeing a transition in sustainable agriculture coming up to 5 to 6 tons per hectare. So this is where I start becoming very positive.
We have to make a little stop, tenemos que hacer una pausa, pero vamos a seguir conversando sobre todo de lo que nosotros, cada uno, puede hacer precisamente para cuidar los recursos hídricos que tenemos, que son bastante limitados y que cada vez están más en riesgo, y también qué podemos hacer efectivamente para sumarnos, como lo ha hecho Costa Rica, con Costa Rica Limpia, y poder limpiar también nuestras propias fuentes de energía. Así que nos vamos a una pausa rápidamente aquí en Encuentros del Futuro y ya regresamos. Ya estamos de regreso aquí en Encuentros del Futuro, hablando de los desafíos en materia energética y también en los recursos hídricos. Y yo les contaba que íbamos a comenzar a conversar sobre lo que cada uno podía hacer. Pero lo primero, I'm going to start with Professor Araya. Why we are more afraid of the things that we have to do in order to stop climate change, that the effect of climate change indeed?
Well, I would like to comment on the fact that right now we're going through a phase where it is very easy for citizens and consumers to be paralyzed when they hear things about climate change, because it sounds so big, it sounds so unfair, it sounds like something that is completely out of their control. And I do think that it is the right time to challenge that approach to climate change, because scaring people is not going to help. And there is research that shows that you can throw data at people to persuade them, and it almost reinforces their bias. So in Costa Rica Limpia, that is precisely what we have learned, that if you really want to engage people beyond fear or beyond these strong emotions, you have to do this kind of tricky balance between acknowledging that there is a problem, because we like truth, or we like facts, but at the same time, we want to pivot and say, hi, but here's a story. As we heard, there are so many good stories. And what we do in practice is to divide the big task into two, because obviously there is the usual repertoire of things you have to do: turn the light off, consume less, you know all the stories, be responsible in how you buy things, or don't buy from certain companies, that kind of approach. But at the same time, we know that change in the world, one person at the time, is going to be very slow. So we also need, in addition to these behavioral changes, we need people to be part of something. And what we have learned in Costa Rica is that people were still very passive. They were not really supporting citizen initiatives. They were kind of like watching a tennis match, watching the politicians and the companies. And now what we are learning is that there are citizen initiatives driven by citizens to deal with the rivers, or to deal with plastics, or in our case with electric mobility. And once you create that hook, then you need to put out all these initiatives and let people choose. So one thing we say is, let's not get into the bad habit of telling people this is the one initiative and that one is not going to work. Or it happens a lot with diets. I've heard people saying, oh, if you don't become a vegan, nothing else is going to do anything for the planet. And I actually think that is very dogmatic. So we try to be pragmatic, and we say to people, what do you care about? Some people deeply care about rivers, others care about biodiversity. I care a lot about oil, but the point is we people working on this, we have to put on the table concrete things for people to join, so that the effort is not only individual, but also collective, because it is a good practice for citizens to be part of citizen initiatives, to support them, to give time, maybe once a month, or maybe support them financially. But it's a habit that is not necessarily practiced in Latin America, to be actively engaged as a citizen, as a voter. And I do think that we need to insist that being more active, and I now that I'm active and they call me activist, it has been quite interesting, because it has a negative, I don't know in other countries, but in Costa Rica, whenever I'm described as a citizen activist or an electric mobility activist, some people come and say, how do you feel about it? Because it has a connotation that is a bad thing, and I think it's a good thing to be a civic
But for example,
advocate.
in terms of mobility, we cannot use everybody a bike.
No.
What is the future of mobility?
Well, I think, we can have a very big conversations about this, but in general, there is certain consensus that we are moving into a direction where we will have things that will move from A to B that will be electric. It's very likely they will be autonomous, not next month, but that's the trend. And of course, most of the discussion is about the fact they'll be shared. So let's imagine it's 2015 at 2019. I imagine, and I have seen these units already in Oslo, is a unit that moves, that basically with an app will pick you up, and it will pick up like 8 people, and it will drive from A to B. We're not there
Because
yet.
in our generation, everybody has a car, for example.
But the interesting thing is that even people who have a bike have said that what they don't like about buses is the fact that they can use an app. So the app has changed a lot of the willingness to do certain things and not do others. So the point is that if we are moving to a world that will be, with transportation that will be electric, autonomous, and shared, we have to start, we need to start asking, what can Chile or Costa Rica start to do in 2019 to start being as ready as possible for this future? Because the other option is to deny it and is to say this is a hoax, this is not going to happen, it's going to be oil, it's going to be business as usual, there's not change, which we see in certain countries. So going back to your question, one big lesson that we can learn, for example, from Amsterdam, is that they have a portfolio of options. You want to bike, you bike. You want to walk, you walk. You want to have a car, it better be electric or shared. You want to take the tram, you can take the tram. But what I really like about the Amsterdam approach, because I spent part of the year there, is that they don't tell people you can only be legitimate or clean if you use a bike or if you use a tram. So I like this idea of a portfolio and let people choose what accommodates to their priorities and lifestyles.
And Professor Lar, thinking about the single person, can you describe a daily routine of a regular person that is responsible in the use of water?
So I was going to give an answer very similar to yours. Well, yeah, and you have the people who advertise that you should be vegan. I am, because I don't like the taste of meat. It's not even...
I don't eat meat, but I'm not vegan, I'm vegetarian.
Exactly. I'm allergic to milk products, and so I immediately become a vegan.
But it suits you, great.
Yeah, it works out. The thing, I think the activism is the key aspect of it. You actually have to engage on these issues to shape policies. What we see in the US today, for example, is highly polarized. And that's what people are focusing on. So they think somehow we have to break this polarization. But I think back to when the Democrats were in government, was it really that different? And at the national level, the rhetoric was different, but the progress was really not as spectacular as people like me would like to see in there. And what you saw was that the consortium of cities in the United States, the mayors got together and they are investing money. And this is the opposite of what we saw in the 20th century. In the 20th century, the idea was if the central state does not invest money and policies in a change, it will not happen. And what we are seeing is various units at different scales are actually moving the needle on these issues. And I think with water, it's the same story. The individuals, of course, have to take responsibility for some things, boycott companies who don't do good stuff and things like that. But yeah, I mean, the way you put the question, I wake up, I brush my teeth, should I use water or should I leave it running? Yes, all of, you know what to do there.
Yes.
But I think it's the larger issues. And as Monica said also, some issues will motivate people who care about biodiversity and the fact that the water story is very intimately connected to that. But a lot of people, I think, will be motivated simply by the fact that they cannot stand waste. So they're going to get into that issue. And there are other people who are motivated simply by innovation or technology. So like the story with the apps, I've seen now devices that some companies have developed where they attach to the faucet, it shows you what chemicals are there in the water, it shows you the rate at which the water is flowing, what the temperature is, it shows up in an app, it shows up on the device. And there are people who just love that stuff and will buy it. This is why people buy iPhones. Is the iPhone really superior to something else? I don't want to get into that debate, but it's because people like it and that they're buying it. So I think that is what we have to tap in terms of engendering change in any of these issues that relate to environment and sustainability.
So there are many ideas for each people. We have to finish. I want to thank you for share with us your points of view. We have to take many brave decisions, and your ideas, I'm sure, are going to be very useful. So thank you. Y gracias a ustedes también por acompañarnos en esta edición de Encuentros del Futuro. Seguramente ya les ha quedado claro que no solamente nos tenemos que preocupar, sino que comenzar a ocupar. Nuestra generación es la última que puede tomar algunas acciones para cambiar lo que está ocurriendo con nuestro planeta. Muchísimas gracias.